in sunny San Diego. And as I say all the time when I bring goRIA on the road to these conferences, on location, what I love most about it is the access to the talent. And let me tell you, today is absolutely no exception to that rule. In just a moment, I'm going to share with you kind of an impromptu interview I was able to do with Jeffrey Gundlach, the Bond King from Double Line. And it was just amazing, a treat, and frankly, an honor to spend some time with him one-on-one in a small group setting. So for context, what was happening is he was doing a talk here at Orion for the conference in general. And then he was kind enough to do sort of this impromptu session for a smaller group for some Q&A and to do a deeper dive on some of the topics he was going over for his main session. And when I had the opportunity to do that, of course, I hopped on it. And as you'll see, it's kind of in Blair Witch mode, right? If you guys remember that movie, sort of the handheld, shaky type of thing. So please excuse the production value, but I promise the content is absolutely fantastic. So it actually went on for about 45 minutes, which I was super thrilled about, and got to ask him a lot of the questions. Whenever I see him on CNBC, I wish I could ask him, and he's on that all the time, of course. So to be able to ask Jeffrey those questions in person was an absolute treat. So it ended up being 45 minutes in total, which of course is a bit much to push out today as a live stream. So I edited it down to just give you a little taste, but we are going to work on it back at Investment News and make it into a podcast, a full-length podcast. And that's going to be up on the website, www.goRIA, hopefully real soon, in another week or two. So stay tuned for that. But for now, here's a little taste. And again, excuse sort of the handheld Blair Witchy effect, but it's fantastic content one-on-one with Jeffrey Gundlach. Here it is. Okay, check. Here we are. So we're continuing our coverage for goRIA, fueled by Investment News. We're live here at the Orion Conference in sunny San Diego. And as I say all the time, one of the things I love most about covering these conferences is the access to the absolute top talent that are at these conferences. And this is, without question, no exception at all. We have with us, as you can see, Jeffrey Gundlach, who's the CEO of Double Line. Jeffrey, thank you so much for agreeing to talk with us.
Sure, thanks.
Okay, so to frame this a little bit, we just got through hearing Jeffrey talk to a larger audience, and this is a little bit of a smaller Q&A. And I'm going to start off with a couple of questions that came to my mind after the presentation, and then we'll open it up to the audience.
All right.
So what comes to my mind first was your thoughts on the veracity, I think was the term you used, on some of the data for inflation. Could you speak to that a bit?
Well, the Fed seems to have gotten themselves into a little bit of a trap, and it started back at Jackson Hole in 2022, I guess it was, where they rolled out super core inflation. And that's the PCE, X food, X energy, X shelter. And like I said, you're down to very little. But they did that, I think, because they thought it was going to be a safer way of thinking about inflation. And then it started to not behave anymore. So I don't know if you're paying attention, but the Fed doesn't talk about super core inflation anymore. It's because it's going up, and it's going up rather sharply over the last 6 months. So then they pivoted to what they came up with last November, which was, let's really cherry pick data. Let's take 3 months and annualize it. Let's take 6 months and annualize it. Because the 3 month and 6 month annualized were looking good at heading towards in the vicinity of 2%. But now that's stopped. And PCE for the past 6 months and 12 months is exactly the same at about 3.5%. And so it's been stable at 3.5%, and it's no longer making any progress whatsoever down towards the 2%. And I think that's increasingly becoming the case on a broader measure of inflation statistics. But inflation statistics have been manipulated really since the 70s, and intentionally manipulated. The idea was that, hey, monetary policy cannot combat inflation due to an oil embargo. We can make interest rates whatever we want, and it's not going to change the price of oil. And that was the big problem, was under Jimmy Carter, was the Arab oil embargo. And so they said, I know, the inflation numbers are highly distorted by oil, which we can't control, so why even try? We'll just look at X oil. That's how all this started. And of course, it looked better. And then there was food inflation. And the food inflation was, they were like, well, we can't control the weather, right? We can't, demand for food is inelastic. So I guess we shouldn't really include food either. because we can't control that. So out goes food and energy, and that's how core was born, the core number. And then it looked better. And so now we're taking out shelter because we don't like that. It just seems pretty clear that these are arbitrary manipulations of the data series.
Yeah. So the bottom line is, if you don't like part of the inflation, just take it off, and inflation is looking pretty good.
It's like if you have a client, and the client is a real curmudgeon, and he says, I see this, you have 80 stocks you bought for me, and I notice that these 3 have done really badly. And what an advisor will often say is, well, if you take those out, we did really well. If you take out what's down, it'll be up.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of that stuff goes on. People want to. I remember I used to manage money for the Maine State Retirement System, and I thought this is going to be the easiest review of my career. We just absolutely crushed it. We were like, this is fixed income. We were 400 basis points ahead of an index. So this is going to be great. And I go in there, and we had shown the returns, and then there was a page that somebody, I wish I would have known, I would have taken this page out, put in there that put this returns of each sector. And we had about 8 sectors in the portfolio. And one of them was convertible bonds. And the whole meeting was about how the convertible bonds didn't do well. And I'm like, but, and it was the most frustrating experience. So that's kind of, but inflation is a very personal thing anyway. If you're having to pay for kids going to college, you have a much different inflation rate than than some retiree. This sort of a thing. So it's inflation indices are kind of a construct. I think you experience inflation in your real life, and at the present moment, I'm not really seeing a lot of inflation. And I'm watching home prices, which I feel like home prices are in Southern California have started to go down. It feels like it to me. Rents are definitely not going up. Commercial office rents, well, I'm rolling my lease in downtown Los Angeles, and we were paying $32 a square foot, and now they're at 22 on the re-up, and I'm at 19, and they say they seem to be kind of sticky at 22, and I'm going to say I'll finally agree to the 22, and I'll sign it for 1 year. 1 year.
Right.
Because there's no chance that these office spaces are going to be absorbed. We're in the Wells Fargo Towers in downtown Los Angeles. Our tower, I haven't seen the numbers in the last 6 months, but it was, and I'm sure it's no better, it was 36% vacant, and the other tower was over 50% vacant. So we're actually, thanks to work at home, we're realizing that IT is equally efficient at a remote site, and lawyers don't really need to be. The other tower is 50% because it's lawyer dominated. Law firms are really a conglomeration of teams. One team works on case A, one case B. They don't really need to talk to each other. So we're you're cutting the space, and I'm saying if we decide that we don't like this model of working, we'll just take the space back because there's zero chance that space is going to get filled. Zero.
Right.
Yeah, so I just feel like that's an obvious source. And as I said outside, the multifamily stuff is going to really put pressure on rents. How many have been put in place already?
Yeah, I think that was a good point as well. I have a few more that I would like to ask, but I thought I would just maybe pan to the audience if anyone has any questions that you would like to ask Jeffrey. Because I've got a bunch. Yes.
Jeffrey, you talked extensively, cautionary tale about the debt in this country and how unsustainable it is and issuer entitlement programs. Do you see a potential solution for either of those issues?
Yeah. There's the sort of obvious but unpopular ones where you means test and you raise the age. And you've got to come up with the scheme, but it's not that hard to get a template for the scheme. You say everybody above the age of X, whatever that is, we can't really mess with you because you've built your entire life around this benefit, and you're going to be homeless if we take it away from you. So, but then you say, okay, but if you're aged, I'll just pick one. I'm just pulling this out of the sky. If you're 50, or if you're 50, the retirement age is 66. If you're 48, the retirement age is 67, and you just keep doing this until you get down there. Now, that's going to be, understandably and sadly, very, very unpopular with people who are 40 and lower. And so that's kind of the issue there. But I think you can do some of that. But it's not really going to get the job done. What you really need to do is something that is, most people, when I say this, they can't process.
Okay, so again, that was just a little taste of it. But do stay tuned to goRIA.com. We are going to have a full-length podcast on that, edited up and on the website fairly soon. But for now, I still am here at Orion's Ascent conference. We're just kicking off day 2, which is the final day, but a lot more great content to come. I'll see you in about an hour. Stay tuned.